Everybody, can you guys hear me okay? Don't need to use a microphone. All right, good. So we are going to kind of fly through this. We only have about an hour. All right, so this is not really going to be an opportunity for a lot of discussion, debate. If you have questions, let's go ahead and get them asked so we can clarify. But again, we're going to go through this fairly quickly. This is being recorded, so if you guys need to look at it later, it will be recorded. At the end, we're going to have up on the projector, up on the screen, a QR code so you guys can get credit for being in attendance for the rules portion of the rules clinic. Okay, so at the end. So again, not a lot of debate, discussion, questions. Go ahead and ask them so we can clarify it, and this will be posted later. Are there any questions before we get started? Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get rolling. Not a ton of rule changes, and they're pretty succinct. They're not really difficult, but we want to make sure we go through it. Everybody's on the same page. As far as what goes under a one-piece singlet for girls, there's some clarification there. You always have to wear a sports bra, whether it's a two-piece, whether it's a one-piece. I guess there's some confusion last year across the country that if you're wearing a one-piece, you also needed to wear a compression shirt. So there were referees around the country that were making girls also wear compression shirts under a one-piece. You only need to do that if you need to ensure full coverage. Okay, it's optional. All right, girls do not have to wear a compression shirt under a one-piece singlet. They do have to have a sports bra on. Okay, any questions on that? Make sure the girls are fully covered. All right, if they need to wear it, let's go ahead and put it on. But again, it is not required under a one-piece singlet. Okay, any questions on that? Facial hair, they've gone ahead and allowed facial hair this year. Okay, you cannot, it's got to be short enough though that you can get through skin checks and the referees or the approved healthcare provider can see the skin underneath. It's got to be short enough. If it's too long, they're going to say, hey, you're going to trim it down or you're going to have to put on a face mask. Okay, one or the other. So again, we will allow facial hair. Got to be short enough to see the skin. If it's not, you're going to have to trim it or you're going to have to put on a face mask. Okay? Down here in the red, this is language that was used across all rules books. This is not a whole lot of change from what we've done in the past with hair. But again, they've put this in every rule book, so this is just making sure all of our rule books have the same language. If you have hair adornments that may cause risk to the opponent, you're not going to be able to wear them. They're going to take them out. If it's soft, scrunchy, what have you, those will be okay. So again, do not meet the requirement. You're going to have to wear a face mask or trim it. And then for those hair control, these adornments on the right, B and C, those would have to be covered with a hair cover. That on A would be okay. Okay. Any questions on either one of those two? Weigh-in, this goes back to what the females have to wear again. Okay. So again, if the female wrestler is going to wear a one-piece singlet and she's going to wear a compression shirt for full coverage, she's also going to have to wear it to the weigh-in. It's a modesty issue. Okay, so if she's going to wear it in competition, ensure full coverage, she's also going to need to weigh it throughout the weigh-in area. Okay, so again, it's not required, but for full coverage, if she's going to wear it in competition and she's going to wear it, she needs to wear it to the weigh-in as well. All right, it talks about that right here. Not required, but if you're going to wear it, make sure she's fully covered. She needs to also wear it to the weigh-in. Okay, any questions on the sports bra, the compression shirt under a one-piece or under a one-piece singlet? Okay, moving on. Shoelaces. They've changed the shoelace rule, or shoelace rule is pretty much the same. It's if the shoe comes off. Okay, so in the past, shoelaces came undone. It was a stall. Shoe came off. It was a technical violation. Okay, had to use a timeout. Had to use injury time. Now if the shoe comes off, it is just going to be a stall. Okay, shoelaces come undone, shoe comes off, it's an automatic stalling call. All right, the referees are going to allow action if it's an imminent scoring situation. If there's any significant action going on, they're going to let that continue, even if the shoe's off. So you're going to be wrestling one-footed or one shoe on until that action is over. The referee will stop it, call the stalling call. Okay, so that is during action, during wrestling. Technical violations are still in effect if they show up to the mat not equipped to wrestle. So if I show up with my shoelaces untied, they're not all the way laced up to the top, that's a technical violation. Okay, so there's a difference. While you're wrestling, shoe comes off, shoelaces come untied, it's a stall. Before the match starts, you show up unprepared to wrestle, not properly equipped, it's going to be a technical violation. Taking an injury timeout, minute 30 to fix it. Okay? So again, that's just readdressing that situation there. So the easiest way to think about it, you're wrestling, it's a stall. Before wrestling gets started, you show up not properly equipped, it's going to be a technical violation. So they're taking away a little bit of that penalty when the shoe comes off. Even though I would argue that shoe comes off, it was purposely meant to happen that way, but they're going to go this direction. Okay, any questions on the shoelaces, shoes, technical violations, anything on the shoelaces? Okay. Points of emphasis. And those are all the rules, guys. I mean, that was the extent of our rule changes for this year, so pretty succinct, pretty brief. They're points of emphasis for the entire country. Good sporting behavior. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. When we go over the NMA points of emphasis, we'll get back to good sporting behavior. Illegal, harmful hold. Just make sure you know what's a legal move and make sure you're teaching legal technique. Okay? Be familiar with what's legal, what's not as coaches, and make sure if it's not legal that you're not obviously coaching it in your practices. Okay? Nelson cradle, salto, things of that nature. Just make sure we're teaching legal technique. And then uniforms. We'll talk also about the uniforms a little bit as well. You know, making sure they're legal, making sure they fit right, making sure they're clean, all that stuff. That's another point of emphasis from the NFHS. Rules reminders, there's really just one. It's the ear guards. This was actually passed, I think, a year or two ago. You cannot have a promotional reference, advertisement reference larger than 2 1/4. Actually, it's manufacturer. 2 1/4 square inches on the headgear. Each cup. Okay, I think there was an Adidas brand out there that had a pretty large logo, and so those can no longer be used. So again, remember, promotional references, manufacturers cannot be larger than 2 1/4 square inches on either side of the ear cup. You can have one on this ear cup, one on that ear cup. You can have one on any piece of the uniform that includes the legal hair cover as well. I doubt we'll get too ticky-tacky with that, but just make sure that you check your headgears. Make sure you don't have anything that's larger than 2 1/4 square inches. Okay. I would recommend everybody get a rule book. Dylan Metzger in our office is running around. Meet up with him. I think he can get you a rule book ordered. Zach, did he talk to you about that at all, Zach?
Yeah, so your school would normally place orders for rule books. So we also have them on site here today. They are $11, though you need to purchase those. But certainly check in with your AD. If you'd like a rule book, they can get that order placed for you. And they may have already. They already have them in your office.
Guys, highly recommend having a rule book. So you know the rules. You read that thing. As long as I've been around the sport, I feel like I know it pretty well. But when it comes to rules, every year I have to go through the case book, and I got to go through the rule book, and I read it from front to back. And I still, you can come up and ask me a question. I may not know it. I'll have to go back to the rule book. I commend our referees that when they're on the match and they got all that stuff going on, they got to go back into that thing 60 pages long and make sure they know the rule. So it's not an easy task, but as coaches, I would recommend you guys all get a rule book. If you don't want a hard copy, I prefer a hard copy, but I also like having an electronic copy. If I need a search for something right away, I punch it in there, I find exactly what I'm looking for. Shoelaces, boom. Flagrant misconduct, boom. And it will search it for you, find the rules that are specific to it. So you can also download the app. I think the app is only like $3 or something, so it's pretty cheap. And that's nice to have in your back pocket. Okay, so I recommend that. So those are the rule changes. Anything, clarification on the rules? I'm getting a lot of from the national office that I don't know if they're confused or they put too many rules in the rule book about shoelaces, but that seems to be throwing everybody all out of whack. I mean, it seems like a pretty simple rule change, but again, coach.
So it's just the trademark for manufacturer. So like if you had a headgear built and it had your school logo on it, that doesn't count.
School logos are okay. They do have a reference in, you can't have stickers. like pin stickers. I've pinned 10 kids. I got 10 stickers on my head. But if it's a commemorative, if it's a flag, school logo. Anything else, you're pretty much out of luck for any stickers on the headgear. Does that answer it? Okay. Anything else on the rules?
Sports bras for women. Last year, I had a ref come up and say it can be 2 straps, and only 1 strap.
They've changed it. I think it was compression, form fitting, they've changed it to sports bra. If it's a sports bra, and there's no definition of how many straps it has to have, it just needs to be a sports bra. No buckles, no belts, nothing hard or abrasive. As long as it's that, they shouldn't be getting in the weeds. Unless they saw that it may be sticking out and you might get your finger caught in it. But if it's just a regular sports bra, like we all have seen, we shouldn't have issues with that. Okay. Any other questions? All right, let me switch this over real quick to our NMA. All right, now these are the NMA points of emphasis. It's mostly going to be over just all of our rule changes and some of the reminders for the season coming up. Obviously, we've had a lot of changes from last year, so I want to make sure we go through. This is the time to ask those clarifying questions if there's anything you are not familiar with. Oh, wrong way. So first thing is our website. Please use this as a resource. I am happy to answer any questions. I'll pick up my phone anytime, but this will have everything that you need under the sun as far as information as far on your wrestling season. So please use this site. You go to nmact.org, you go to sports. I don't know if you can see that there. I don't even know if I got a clicker. Right there, sports, you go down, you find wrestling. You'll need to actually review all of these areas. Okay, that's kind of going to be your homework before the season gets started. Please take time to review each one of these areas on our website. It's part of our online rules clinic as well. Bylaws, all of our rules, NMA rules, competition limits, we'll go through that, but make sure you review that. All the important dates. We went through the rule changes, the weight management program. Make sure you're familiar with all the processes and rules there. Administration from track wrestling, how to run a tournament, how to input all your results. Review that, the girls wrestling memo. And all of our postseason information. Okay, so all of our coaches, that's kind of your homework before the season gets started, so you are aware of all of that information. Okay, weight classes. Hopefully everybody can read those. Hopefully most of you guys are aware. We're sticking with 12 for the girls, same 12 we used last year, moving into 13 for the boys this year. Okay, so we are changing to 13 for the boys. Postseason eligibility. We surveyed the coaches. It was about a 50-50 split on maintaining some sort of 50% threshold. We'll be looking at it in the future of potential alternatives. But for right now, we will be using that 50% threshold at or below the weight classes you're going to have your kids entered in the postseason. Okay, and we'll talk about out-of-state competition in our next slide. Is that small, huh? Can you guys read that at all? I'll walk through it and make sure you guys are okay. It's smaller than I'd hoped for. You're only going to be eligible to wrestle at your minimum wrestling weight class. Okay, so if you go out of state, you're going to have to meet their minimum wrestling weight class. You're going to have your MWW, your minimum wrestling weight class, is going to have to be scratch or below. We're not going to take into account growth allowance. We're not going to take into account consecutive day allowance. You have to have your MWW, your minimum wrestling weight at assessment, at scratch or lower to wrestle a weight class in another state. So when we look around all of the surrounding states, they're all using 14. So they're about, basically every time we go into another state, they're about a pound lighter than ours. So the example I used here was 106.9 is the kid's MWW, minimum wrestling weight, after his assessment. He's going to be eligible for 107 in our state. But if you want that kid to wrestle 106 when you go into Colorado or Arizona or Texas, he would not be eligible for that, even if they're at their growth allowance or even consecutive day allowance. So you need to know if you're going to another state and you want those kids to be in that same weight class, make sure they assess there. And again, we're talking only about a pound. It's not going to be significant, but you're going to need to look at your assessments afterwards and see where they land. Okay, any questions on that? Now, the same thing is going to happen when they come into our state. They're actually going to have a little bit of a benefit when they come into our state, I think up until 189. They're going to actually get some extra weight when they come into here, okay? Because they're all a pound lighter, a pound or two lighter. Now they're going to get some weight when they come into our state. But again, their MWW has to be at that weight class or below. Okay, does that make sense? Any questions on that? So again, the out-of-state teams, they come into our state, they have to follow our weight classes. 12 for girls, 13 for boys, okay? You got a team coming from out of state. They use 14, we use 13. We're wrestling a 13 weight class dual meet. Now, if they have a full lineup, there's nothing that says you can't run an exhibition before the match gets started. But again, we're going with the 13. Also, if you have an individual tournament that they're coming to, you can have as many as you want in each weight class. Okay, there's no limit, but we're going to use those 13 weights. So where we run into this bog down is around 52, 60. That's where we run into it. So you may have 2 kids that enter in that weight class. So there's nothing that's going to prevent you from doing that, but they have to follow our weights. Now, the 50% rule. We basically had to create some equivalents for this 50% rule. Okay, and again, we're talking about these areas where we kind of get bogged down in. 60. So let's just use 60 as an example. I've got a kid who's eligible for 60 in our state. He's going to go to another state where they use 57 or 65. If his assessment allows him to wrestle 57, he can go ahead and wrestle that. That's lighter weight class anyway. That's going to count as a weigh-in for 160. He could also go into that state and wrestle 65, and that will still count as a weigh-in towards his 50%. I put this in our wrestling weight management booklet, so that's part of your homework. Just go in there and make sure you know the equivalents. Anytime you're going lower, you're fine. It's when you go up a higher weight class, you got to make sure that it's one of the equivalents of that particular weight class that you want the kid in the regional tournament. As long as it is, it's counting. And again, we don't track that stuff. You guys need to make sure you keep your weigh-in sheets. So if anybody says, hey, I don't know, this kid all of a sudden is dropping down. I don't know, he hadn't wrestled there all year. And then I'll call you and say, hey, can you show us your weigh-in sheets? All right, and as long as it's an equivalent, you're going to be okay. Okay. Any questions on the equivalent weigh-ins when you go out of state? All right, classifications and state qualifying. Okay, hopefully everybody's aware. We have moved to 2 in the boys and are still sticking with 1 for the girls. I assume that's going to start growing here at some point. We'll reevaluate that. But for right now, we're sticking with 1 for the girls, 2 for the boys. Each classification, girls included, are going to have 2 regional tournaments. Okay, 2 regional tournaments. That event replaces our old district tournament. So it's just a swap out. We used to have the individual district tournament. It's gone. It's now the regional tournament. You're still going to have to do your district duels, which we'll get into later. But basically, the regional tournament just replaces the district tournament. I've heard some schools, oh, we still have to do a district tournament. No. You have to do the duels, but you don't have to have an individual tournament unless you guys want to do that. Out of each of those regions, we're going to take top 7 to the state tournament. Okay, so all those matches, and we'll talk about seeding in a minute too, all those matches are going to be important for seeding criteria at the state tournament, but especially that 7th place match because that will get you automatically into the state tournament. You're going to have 2 wild card spots that are open, and we're going to run a track wrestling seed report, and we'll select those 2 into the state tournament based on the track wrestling seed report. Okay, so it's not going to be winning percentage anymore. We're going to try to get a global perspective on who our best 2 next wrestlers need to be at the state tournament. So we're not going 8-8. It could end up being 9-7 based on who gets those wild cards. Okay. Dates for the girls, February 3rd through the 4th. Boys are the 10th and 11th. If you have if you're over 16 wrestlers, you're going to have 2 days because there's a chance you could run into a 7-match situation. So again, plan on a 2-day event for your girls. I think we had 1 or 2. I anticipate that'll be bigger. We had 1 or 2 go beyond that last year. 4A boys, I'm sure there'll be some weight classes in the middle that will have all 19 or I think it's 19. So you may run into a situation where you will run into, if you try to run it in one day, you're going to have more than 6 matches. So you need to split those into 2 days. 5A lucked out a little bit with their lower numbers, so they can run theirs on a single day if they choose.
Scott, do those 2 wild cards, do they come from the same region?
Yep, totally. Yep. So I know there was some concern, hey, some of these regions, maybe not so balanced out. But when you throw them all in there, if the 2 best kids come from the same region, and that happens through track wrestling, they show that, then they will go. So that will be the benefit of going that route versus in the past, winning percentage can be really subjective, especially when you got a lot of forfeits. So we're going to use the track wrestling method to find out who those next best 2 are. But yes, Coach. Any other questions on qualification, classes, state qualifying? Okay, regional seeding. So the regional tournament, okay, it's kind of like our pre-state or the tournament for semi-state. This is our old state seeding criteria. It's pretty much the exact same criteria we've used in the past. So head-to-head, common opponent, returning state place, winning percentage. Now, we used to have a different threshold. It was 12 matches for the girls, 16 for the boys. But of course, by the time I go through the regional to district tournament, I'm going to have more matches by the time I get to state. They used to be the same. The thresholds were the same for the state qualifying event as they were for the state event. So obviously, after you go through the regional, you're going to have more matches. So we ended up lowering the threshold for winning percentage. And hopefully everybody remembers, but this is a priority order seeding process. Okay, you're going to compare your kid against every other kid in the field. You're first going to look at head-to-head. If I'm better than you, I beat you head-to-head, I'll get a point. Then I move on to the next opponent. No head-to-head. The next thing we look at is common opponent. If I have common opponent, I earn a point. I move to the next. No head-to-head, no common, or I look at returning state place. If I have nothing to compare myself with you, we look at our winning percentage with those thresholds. Okay, so that will be at the regional tournament. All right? Now, when we get to our state tournament, I surveyed the coaches and everybody wanted to have some criteria from the regional tournament to make those matches meaningful so people weren't ducking out, sliding back from semis, and just going to 6th and leaving it at that. So we've broken these up a little bit. I think you guys would probably agree there's tiers in our state placers. Maybe those top 3 are a little different than the bottom 3, 1, 1st, 2nd, 3rd versus 4th, 5th, 6th. So sitting in committee, in our wrestling committee, we kind of talked this out, and this is going to be our criteria. Okay? Head-to-head and common is our first 2 main. Then we're looking at returning state place. If that kid's coming back, top 3 placer, he's probably pretty legit, or she's probably pretty legit. Then we're looking at current results. We're going to look at those regional standings, okay, 1st through 3rd. After that, nothing to compare, or they're tied. We go to returning state place, 4th through 6th. After that, we look at our regional place, and then finally we're looking at that. If there's nothing in there, and that's going to be for those placers that were that didn't place, then we're looking at those winning percentage minimums. Okay. Any questions on the state seeding criteria? Hopefully, that regional tournament going to create some situations where coaches aren't as nervous about holding kids out. You're going to have to earn it at some point anyway. So when we go to dual meets, it's best to just throw the kid out and let's wrestle, So I'm hoping this will kind of alleviate some of the concerns of jockeying and that we can have good dual meets, let the chips fall where they will with those state placings, where you place in the regional tournament. Hopefully that'll give us a little truer seed. I think the regional just by itself, just because it's a larger pool of wrestlers, is going to help us with our seeding as well. Any questions on the state seeding criteria? Competition limits, making sure we go through these. Everybody knows 32-point limit for all varsity squads, 28 points for your sub-varsity. That's your team, and the limits are both team and individual. Okay, so nobody, your team or individuals, can go beyond that. Okay, make sure you're tracking all the points, both team and individual. Single duels, 1 point. 2 duels, a try or a double duel, 2 points. 1 day event, 3 to 5 duels, because that's the max you can wrestle in a day is 5. Or a 1 day tournament, individual tournament is 3. 2 day event, single or double elimination is 4. And then a 2 day event with no or limited elimination is 6. That's those combination tournaments, pools, then we go to brackets, 2 days of duels, nobody gets eliminated. Those are your 6-point events. Okay? For your middle school, they do not have a point value. They just use events. Okay? Any event, 2-day event, 1-day event, dual, one dual, that's an event. Try is an event, quad's an event. They just go by the events. Now, when you pull up your 8th graders to the high school though, if they've wrestled in an NMA competition, those events that they wrestled at the NMA level at the 8th grade or at the middle school are going to follow them up to the high school. Okay, so I know the basin, they started already. Anything that those kids do, if they get pulled up to the 8th grade, up to the high school, all those matches are going to count, and you just use the equivalent points. If it's a 2-day tournament, double elimination, it's a 4-point event. You just take whatever they did there, turn it into the high school equivalent. Now, once the high school season begins, if you have kids, and that's going to be October 31st, if you have kids that are going to go to outside tournaments, I'm not sure when Freak Show or any of that stuff is happening, I haven't kept track of it, but if there's tournaments that your kids want to go to during the season that are not NMAA, they're not interscholastic, those are going to count towards their competition limits as well. So just be sure, and I don't think there's a ton, I think Rocky Mountain Nationals is trying to kind of work its way in, but for the most part, there's not a lot that goes on during the season, but if they do go to those tournaments and you let them, those are going to count. And it's the same thing. You take the equivalent of that event and apply it to the points system that we have. Okay? And again, we still have that 25% threshold for postseason eligibility. So before the regional tournament, if you have a 32-point schedule, your kids are going to have at least 8 points to be eligible for the regional tournament. Okay?
Is that included if the kids get injured this year?
It's a good question, Coach. So if documentation to show that the kid's been out for a long period of time due to an injury, and you can substantiate it with documentation from a doctor, we'll let those kids slide. You'll send it to our office. We'll review it. We'll let those kids go. So good question. Okay. District dual meet. So we changed this a little bit. So hopefully it's probably more confusing than I hoped it would be. But it was coming from a good place to try to give you guys some leeway on these dual meets. Your boys team, your boys varsities have to duel everybody in the district. Everybody. I don't care if they got one kid or two, and that's why we use these points. You have to duel everybody in your district to be postseason eligible. Your girls, sub-varsity, they don't have this requirement. You can do it if you want. We'll talk about that in a second. You're going to use these competition limits to take off right off the top of your 32-point schedule. So if you've got a full 30, your AD is giving you the latitude to use all 32 points. You're in a district that has 7 to 8 teams. Right off the bat, you're going to take off 4. You now have 28 points to do whatever else you want to do with your schedule outside of your district duels. But those 4 points are going to be reserved only for your district duels. Okay? And again, you can schedule those any way you want. After you take those 4 points off, you want to do single duels with everybody in that district, have 7 single duels, that's fine. That's up to you. Okay? But right off the bat, off the top of your limit, whatever your AD is giving you, you're going to whack off right off those points. Okay? You can schedule in any format you want. Just make sure on your max prep schedule that you you designate those in advance, okay, with an asterisk. That these are going to be my district duels, okay? So when you get on it, you can't just run into an opponent at a tournament or at a dual tournament, happen to run into them by chance and count that as your district duel. It has to be designated in advance on your max prep schedule, okay? Any questions? We're going to get a little bit more into the weeds on the next slide. Before we do, any questions on that? I try to keep that as simple as possible. This is for your team points, okay? For your overall team, your boys' teams, okay? Right off the bat, you're just going to take those points off. Now, some additional points to remember. Your individuals, as well as your girls' teams, your sub-varsity teams, if you want to do district duels as well, you're going to count those individually. You may have a kid that's varsity. He's hurt and he only does 2 duels. So let's go back to here. So he's in a district with 6 teams. Well, he wrestles 2 and he doesn't wrestle anymore. Well, he's not going to be charged all 3 points. He only wrestled 2 duels. So you'll track that kid individually. Once you hit the max, you can't go any more over it either with those district duels. Okay, so you're only charged your girls, your sub-varsity, your individuals, for the duels actually wrestled up to that high max threshold that we've created. Okay? So your teams, they get charged all of that. Your boys' teams, boom, right off the bat. Your individuals, your girls, sub-varsity. If you don't do them all, you're not going to get charged for them all. But once you hit this max, okay, you're charged all those points. If I wrestled in a district with 6 teams, I wrestled 3 of those, and that's it. That's all I'm getting charged. Okay? Well, let's say I go 4. I won't get charged for the 4th duel. I'm getting only charged the maximum I can for those as an individual. Okay, hopefully I didn't add more than I needed to and confuse you guys. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, if you decide you're going to have a couple district schools come in, you're going to duel them, but you've got somebody that's a neighboring school, it's not in your district, or it's a lower classification, you want to bring them over. You've already taken care of your district dual points. That's already off your schedule. You're not even worried about that. You're going to count those non-district duels separately. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's use the Carlsbad district. They've got 4 schools in their district. Okay, they're going to do a round robin on one day. They want to invite Goddard and Artesia as well. They're in the same district. They're going to have a 5 duel thing. They're all going to wrestle each other. Okay, Carlsbad has their 4, and then they had Goddard and Artesia on the side. They're going to be charged 2 points for those 2 duels that they wrestled against Goddard and Artesia because those were non-district. On the flip side, Goddard and Artesia, they're going to wrestle those 4 5A schools. They're going to wrestle 4 non-district duels that day. So how many points will they be charged for 4? Good job. 3. Because like I said, going back to our point system, if I can get there, 1-day event, 3 to 5 duels. You're charged 3 points. So you're just going to take and look at those non-districts and apply the point value to those that you wrestle in conjunction with your district schools. Just.
So in our district, the large district, and just the logistics of it, right, getting everybody together, there's going to be events where we're wrestling. We have, say, Santa Teresa Chaparral in Artesia at one
Yep.
One event, and then we have another event where we Santa Teresa Chaparral and Silver at that event. Are we charged 2 additional? We wrestle all of them. We've already met everybody. We got our 4 points out of the way. Are we going to be charged additional 2 points to wrestle those twice?
If you wrestle them again.
Okay.
If you don't wrestle them, you've already done, and now you're going to pair up differently to get the rest of them done. You're only going to be, and again, Jesse, if you're going to, those are all district schools, right?
Right. Yes.
You're correct. You're not going to get charged any more at all.
But if we wrestle them again in that event, would we get charged again?
If you wrestle them again, yes. You get the one time for everybody, and you got to count. If you wrestle them twice, you're going to have to get together and say which one's going to count. Right. That one will count towards your limit. The second one's going to be an extra point you're going to have to add on to your total tally. Okay. And then the last thing that I anticipate happening, you may have a district, hey, we're just not going to be able to find time to do this. We're going to be at the Southwest Shootout. We're going to be at the Pinto Duels. We're going to be at the Silver Duels. We're going to be up in Aztec. Let's just meet there and do it. You can do that, but this is point 3. You're still going to be charged the full point value for that event. Okay, that's kind of your prerogative to decide to do that. You're not going to get any freebies on that. That's a separate tournament. It's not a district duel event. It's a tournament. You run into a district opponent. You want to count that. That's still going to be part of your points. You're going to have to take off your total. So I hope I wanted to keep this as simple as possible. Give you guys a little bit of the benefit with those points. Give you a little extra opportunities to schedule the way you wanted to, and still do duels. But hopefully I didn't make it overly complicated for everybody. If you have questions, call me, and I'll walk you guys through it. There's also a document that kind of goes through all this and outlines it. So any questions on that? Okay, see how much time we're running out to. About 20 minutes. All right, I think I missed one. Okay, Max Preps. Make sure we're entering our schedules into Max Preps. Okay, we need your competition points. Okay, that's a track for the NMAA. It's a track for your competition to make sure you're staying within those competition limits. Okay? The district duels, you don't need to put a point value on those. Just mark them with an asterisk. That's a district duel. I know how many you have in each district. I know to take those points off. But everything else needs to have a point value assigned to that event on Max Preps. Okay? You may need to get with your AD to get access to that. I assume most of us, our ADs, don't always have the best idea what's going on with wrestling, so you'll have to coach them a little bit. ADs on the backside will enter them through Dragonfly, which is for scheduling purposes for the officials, so for assignment purposes. So again, coaches still are going to need access to get to Max Preps. You're going to post it, you're going to leave it, you're not going to mess with it the rest of the season, but we need it posted up there. And then again, our ADs will post that for their assignment purposes. That's due December 1st, so that gives you about a month to get your schedule posted up on Max Preps. Okay, any questions on that? Track wrestling, separate season for boys and girls again. All right, so you should have all got your logins sent out. If you haven't, contact me, let me know, but I should have it out to every school, one for boys, one for girls. This year, we're not going to add our girls into our boys season, okay? So the girls and the girls, the boys and the boys, no crossover. That also means that girls are not going to be able to wrestle boys competition this year. So girls are separate completely from the boys. No girls in boys dual meets, girls in boys tournaments, girls tournaments, boys tournaments, girls duels, boys duels, no crossover anymore, okay? Even JV. In red, this is key. Do not, in the track wrestling system, create events that you will not be hosting. What ends up happening is, and I appreciate people being zealous and they overzealous, they want to get in and get that thing done, and I appreciate that. If you create one and he creates one and she creates one and then we have 5 events for the same thing, you pick something, I pick something, now all of our results are going to different places. So have the host enter their own events. And they can even enter at the week of, because at some point they're gonna have to create a weigh-in sheet. So you may be getting antsy, I need to post it. If it's not posted in a timely fashion and you're getting down to it, call me, I can prod them along, but just make sure we're entering things that we're hosting and nobody else. And again, hopefully everybody went through this last year, but if you're hosting 2 separate events, girls and boys division, you're gonna have to order 2 different tournaments. Okay, they're on 2 different seasons, so the price stays the same, but it's just and I think they've told me they're working on that to kind of get everything under the same umbrella. I think that's what the merger with Flow, but they're not there yet. So 2 different tournaments, cost will be the same, but you're gonna have to basically run 2 different tournaments at the same time. It's usually pretty as simple as minimizing a window and going it that way, but just make sure you remember that. Again, hopefully old hat for everybody. All your varsity individual results entered in the track wrestling. All your varsity tournaments, individual tournaments, have to use track wrestling software. Your dual tournaments, we're not there yet. We may look at that down the road, but those can be entered by coaches on their own. Individual results in a varsity meet count toward the varsity record. So if you enter a JV into a varsity tournament, those are varsity matches. They're wrestling varsity competition. So remember that. In red, and this won't be such a big issue this year because we're going to track wrestling seating, but a lot of schools will have kids that have in JV tournaments and in varsity tournaments. And the track wrestling system just collects all those matches into one database. So all those JV matches get added into the record. Okay, so when you go to a tournament and you import your roster and kids 20-1, well, he's only 15 of those matches were at JV. If you'll go into your roster on track wrestling, go to your roster, pick the kids, and mark them varsity, that will just give you their varsity record. So anything JV or below, it just spits out of there. So again, it won't be as big a deal because we used to use winning percentage and I had people that had JV matches and I had to go back in there and find them. But it is good to just be able to pull a kid up and see his varsity record versus having all those JV matches in there. And then the last thing that kind of funky, I don't know how many people run the stats program, but if you run stats, you're entering your own results into track wrestling. The tournament administrator at the tournament is entering another result. We got to take one. If the scores do not match, then the system picks it up as 2. And I usually catch it, coaches will catch it. But if I'm in a tournament, I'm the administrator, I'm the scorekeeper at the mat, Double leg takedown, right to fall. 0-0 fall, I mark it. Well, the guy running the stats program puts a 2, takedown, then a fall. That's going to show us 2 separate results in the system. 2-0, 0-0, that's now 2 wins for that kid versus 1. So just make sure as you're talking to your tournament admins and they're running the clocks at the side, try to be as accurate with those points as you can. It doesn't happen a whole lot at the lower levels, but when you start to look at those more competitive matches that may have gone back, caught a kid and pinned him, and the results are different, you'll have 2 wins over that guy or girl instead of 1. So just a little kind of funky thing. And like I said, we do a pretty good job of tracking those, but you also need to keep your eye on those as well. All right, weight assessments. October 31st, first day of practice. We can get started. Cluster assessments, those group assessments, we usually recommend those for the 3rd week of the season, and then shortly after Thanksgiving. Make sure once those assessments are entered, you check right away. Okay, right away you go in there and you look at them and see where your kids are. You have a 2-week window to appeal. 2 weeks. And then once that 2 weeks is gone, the kid's stuck there. They also can't come in 2% lighter than what they initially assessed at. So make sure your kids are close to weight, especially if they're really skinny. I've had issues where a kid came in, 9 pounds over the weight. A week later, he was kind of heavy, and now he's all the way down. He's almost lost 8 pounds in 2 weeks. Well, he cannot assess 2% lighter, so he's not going to be able to do it. He's not going to be able to get down to the lower weight class. So again, I would recommend having them as close as they can to the weight they want to wrestle when they do their assessment. December 1st, we have our nutrition education program due. January 1st, our growth allowance will go into effect. January 8th, our descent plans lock. And again, you're going to see that on your Alpha Master report or your descent plan. You're going to see the kid. You're going to see where he can go, she can go, where it cuts off. If you think that kid's a pound or 2 away from where you might want him or want her, I'd recommend appealing, because you may be in a position where you need that kid down a lower weight class at the end of the year because somebody got hurt. So if a kid's within a pound or 2 of the next weight and they've got some room to spare, I would recommend appealing within that 2-week window. Any questions on assessments? Uniforms, just make sure we're weighing in a legal competition uniform. Singlet, 2-piece, make sure all participants are wearing a suitable undergarment underneath. And then again, girls have a sports bra on, and then a compression top. It is not required, but if it's needed to make sure they're fully covered, if they're going to wear it under a 1-piece singlet, well, they need to wear it to the weigh-in and wear it during competition. Okay. NFHS skin condition form, I recommend weekly skin checks. Remove any wrestlers that have any issues, get them to a doctor ASAP. Have that form signed by the doc and get it back. That form will stay valid for 2 weeks from the time they see the doc. Make sure you bring it to those weigh-ins, because if a referee sees it, an athletic trainer sees it, and you don't have that form, they think that's something, then the kid's out. So make sure you have that with you when you're going to those events. COVID-19 guidelines, it's pretty much in flux. We never know where we're going with COVID. We're going to follow the PED toolkit, whatever comes out with that. Right now, as it stands, it's 5 days out for COVID. When you come back, 5 days in a mask. And that means competition, it means practice. We're not going to know if a kid's coming back from COVID. Your school administrators will. You'll have to deal with that at a local level. But those are the rules right now. 5 days out, 5 days in a mask upon return. Do not need the return to play form that we used last year anymore. And if you're in close contact, there's no quarantine requirements at this point. Everything's on a local level decision. So follow your school district policy. All right, I made some notes on this one. I hate getting up on my soapbox, but I feel like this is the time that maybe address it at the beginning of the year before we get too far into the season, and just talk about respect, sportsmanship, officials going into the future. When I think about respect, or I think about sportsmanship rather, it all comes down, in my opinion, to respect. I mean, respect for everybody, the coaches, the officials, the wrestlers. It just feels like, I don't know, over the last 10, 15 years, it's been okay to be disrespectful. to not treat people with respect, to flex on a kid, to hot dog in front of a kid, to scream and yell at an official. And, you know, this is not college wrestling where the stakes are a little higher. This is not the MMA. It takes a lot of courage from the standpoint of a competitor to be out on the mat, to be an official who has other things they could be doing, to put themselves in vulnerable, exposed positions. I think we need to remember that, keep that in the back of our heads, and respect that, because it takes a lot to be out there exposed for the world. And I'm not necessarily letting the officials off the hook on this. They have a duty to be professional. You know, they have a duty to do their job well, to be respectful. But it's hard to do when a coach is in their face from the time that whistle blows, screaming and yelling and spitting, and then the fans are going bonkers, and then the kids also feed off of that. So I think respect just needs to come back into the fold a little bit across the board in our sport. Going off of that to the expectations, I think it's important that we reevaluate what our expectations are of our officials as well. They are not perfect. The best of them are not perfect. They're going to make mistakes, and you better be prepared for that. If you expect perfection, you're going to be upset a lot of the time. Okay? Things are going to happen. You have to be able to control what you can control. I think more realistic expectations when I was thinking about this of what I would like to see out of an official as a coach is I don't expect perfection. Yeah, I want them to be as close to perfect as they can. Are they going to make mistakes? Yes. Am I going to be upset when they do? Or I don't agree? Yes. Okay, but what are more realistic expectations of an official? Are they coachable? Are they willing to learn? Do they hustle? Do they have work ethic? Are they approachable? Are they accountable? Those are the things that I would measure an official by versus perfection, because that's not going to happen. And the other thing I hear accountability. Well, coaches and wrestlers are held accountable all the time. What about our officials? How are they held accountable? Well, if they're not competent, if they're not professional, more often than not, they don't get to go and referee the highest event we have. Okay, so there is a measure of accountability. And I would say as coaches, if you want a larger pool of officials, then we need to treat them better, and we need to go beat the bushes for more and put them into the pool. I'm really pleased with what NMJW is doing. It's my first year. My boys was last year. Seeing what they're doing with getting those kids at the high school, working those events. Hopefully our parents don't run them off before they get the chance to, because those parents are vicious. They can be vicious. I won't say all of them, but that's putting those kids in the fire. So again, I just think at the end of the day, we got to look at this globally, and I think respect needs to come into the fold. We're all wrestlers. We all are passionate about this sport, and just to keep that in the back of our heads as we go through this season. And again, if you do have somebody in your area, let's sign them up and see if we can make them unofficial. Okay. Forfeits. I thought I was off my soapbox. Last one. I don't think there's anything worse for our sport than forfeits. People don't show up to a duel to watch more forfeits than matches. I understand that there are schools that have small enrollments and it's difficult, but we need to try to do everything we can as a collective group to put our best kids out there, to put on a show for people to watch that's exciting, that will get them involved. Hey, maybe I want to wrestle. But when they show up and they see, 5 matches and 8 forfeits, what the heck was that? So again, I know kids get hurt. I know we have small enrollments, but hopefully we're not holding kids out to save seeds. Hopefully we're putting them out on the mat, give the fans what they want to see, and build our sport up a little bit that way. Okay? So hopefully, I think that's the last for my soapbox stuff. Other reminders, close to getting out of time. One-day events during the school week cannot start until 3. So I keep hearing people that, hey, we're going to run this tournament. We're going to weigh in at 9 and start wrestling at 10 on a Friday. It's going to be one day. Our rules don't allow for that. Kids are supposed to be in school as much as they can, so we have a bylaw approved by our superintendents. Cannot have a one-day event start until 3. You can weigh in before that, but you can't actually start the event until 3 o'clock on a one-day event during the school week. Regular season events, okay, still have a 5-match limit. Can't go beyond 5 matches in a regular season event. You can do that in the postseason, but not during the regular season. Okay, so make sure you remember that as well. If you're in a 16-man bracket and it's full with 16, there's a chance you're going to run into a 6-match limit. So you're going to have to be kind of creative with your format of your matches, or you're going to come into a position where a kid's, not going to be able to wrestle that 3rd and 4th place match, or 5th and 6th if you go that deep. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And then making sure everybody knows you cannot schedule regular season competition the week of the regional tournament. Okay, that's another bylaw we have. So you're short. You want to get another match in before it's like on a Monday or a Tuesday, and regional start Friday or Saturday. You can't do that. So that's the same for the girls. The girls are going to be done a week earlier. They can't wrestle that week. They can't wrestle the following weeks once regionals are done. No competition, regular season competition the week of the regional tournament. Okay, it's another NMA bylaw. Out of season coaching. I know there's some questions on that. If you're not aware, by and large, it's pretty much gone by the wayside. Okay, we have now opened it up. We've decided it's better to have our coaches with our kids than pushing those kids out to the club scene or with a parent that doesn't know wrestling. So out of season coaching is pretty much gone by the wayside. 7.5-hour rule is gone. You can coach your kids in competition. You can travel with them. You can run joint fall practices, spring practices, freestyle Greco. Make sure if you're running tournaments in the spring that they're sanctioned by somebody. Just for safety and insurance purposes, but we've pretty much opened it up. Okay, is there any questions on any? I know it's a 180 shift from where we used to be, but I think what we're hearing is that this is a good move, and I've always felt we need to get rid of this rule, so I'm happy with where we're going with it. Any questions on out-of-season restrictions? The biggest things we are still looking at. You can't still have undue influence recruiting and following a coach. Okay? So we're now going to be in a space where we may be opening our rooms a lot more often. Okay? To kids from all around our area. We cannot recruit those kids. We cannot influence them to come to my school. If we find evidence of that, it's a very significant penalty. I think it's a $2,500 fee. Not even if they're a good workout partner. And it extends beyond just the coaches. I mean, it's anybody in that community. And it's not an easy thing to find. You got to have kind of a smoking gun. Hey, Johnny, you should come and wrestle for us. We got a spot for you at 139. You'll be our varsity guy. Stuff like that. But we will investigate if we hear about it, and we don't want to see it, obviously. So just make sure there's no undue influence, there's no recruitment. Coaches, if you're going to let your kids go into somebody else's room, I'd keep tabs on them. Okay? I'd keep tabs on them. Hopefully, we're doing this as a collective group to make wrestling better for everybody, and we're not going to go poaching kids from other programs. Okay? At the end of the day, we're trying to open this up, benefits you guys, but we want to do it the right way. And last thing, just so you guys are aware, we have this following the coach rule still. If you are allowing kids to come into your room that are at another school, or they're out of your district, they haven't made their choice yet, anytime after the 6th grade, and they decide they're going to show up at your doorstep and they want to come to your school, transfer you to school, open enroll at your school, they could potentially have to sit out for a year of all competition at all levels at the new school. So that's the following the coach rule. So again, you may want to do some due diligence on your part of just some disclaimers. Say, hey, I'm happy to have you come in, but if you end up coming here, there's a good chance that you will be ineligible. Now, again, we don't know what everything is going on around the state, but I'll tell you, if it's a decent kid, the coach is going to tell us about it, the parent's going to tell us about it, the parent that's getting their kid losing his spot is going to tell us about it. So again, hopefully we just use this for the right reasons. It seemed to work well when I was growing up through the ranks. Having our rooms open to anybody and everybody that wanted to come in and get better. What's that? What is that again? No, it's never been 2. There's a unique situation where it extended beyond, but that was a different situation. Okay? So again, let's just make sure we're doing it the right way, guys. I mean, that's the end of the day. You know, we're all trying to get better. This is giving us the opportunity to be with our kids all year round if they want to wrestle all year round. Okay, so let's just make sure we do it right. Any questions? All right, before you guys get out of here and get ready for your next session, everybody take out your cell phone, and hopefully everybody's got a up-to-date cell phone. If not, you may have to borrow one from your neighbor. Yeah, you're going to have to borrow somebody's, coach. So if you need one, just borrow borrow the guys next to you, the girls next to you. Take that out, open up your camera. Follow that QR code. Fill that in, and that will get you, hold on. If anybody's having problems with it, let me know. Everybody needs to do this if you guys want credit for being here for this session. If you need to, you don't have an up-to-date phone, borrow your neighbors, you can enter it after they enter it, and just make sure you enter your information. It'll go right into our database. Okay? All right, guys, thanks. We will see you at the next session, and I will see you in the morning. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.